Warning: the podcast which you are about to listen contains references to death, murder, and mutilation. If you do not think you can handle this content, please stop the episode now and listen to one of the other episodes of Bowtie Talks. Thank you. Greetings, people of the internet. Welcome once again to Bowtie Talks. I, of course, am your excellent host, Luke Johnson, coming to you as usual from my undisclosed location in Midwest USA. And I thought that since last week's episode was about tall tales, this week's episode should be about another popular American story form, the urban legend. You know, the kind of stories that are told around campfires or passed from child to child at playgrounds. Told at parties, haunt the tabloids, and are told to hype people to see how much they can get other people to believe. Yes, sometimes it amazes me just how much humans can actually believe. But in some cases, some urban legends have actually happened. And that is why I am here today. So please join me as I unravel the origins of some popular American urban legends. And we begin with one of the oldest examples of urban legends, and that, of course, is the Kraken. Tales of giant squid-like creatures grabbing onto ships and pulling them downward go back to even the time of the Vikings, and to even more contemporary tales of the legendary Kraken. Tales of giant squid-like creatures grabbing onto ships and pulling them downward have existed for centuries, if not millennium. Tales of such a creature date back to even the time of the Vikings. Perhaps even the Roman Navy or the Greek Navy may have had stories about the Kraken, as it has been called before. Most of these encounters were dismissed because they seemed to be too unbelievable. That was until 1857, however. It was in that year that a Danish zoologist, and yes, I am pronouncing that correctly, zoologist, not zoologist, named Japetus Steenstrup. Man, that has to be the most Danish name I've ever heard. What is up with Denmark? Anyway, identified the remains that were thought to belong to a species of giant squid. Man, why is it always... What is up with Canada? I mean, they have Sasquatch, the hockey games. Yeah, Canada's a weird country. But anyway, yes, the first of an intact giant squid were found in Canada. Science would finally have definitive proof in 2004 when Japanese researchers captured the first images of a large giant squid in its natural habitat about 900 meters below the ocean's surface. And this finally confirmed the elusive creature, capable of reaching lengths of up to 40 feet, was definitely not just a legend. For our next urban legend, we have to look to the recently modern era of cars. I'm sure that some of you out there are familiar with an urban legend of a woman driving home and she is being seemingly harassed by a car following her. When she does finally stop, it turns out the other driver is trying to warn her of a killer hiding in the back seat. Now, this story does have some roots in reality. In New York City, around the time of 1964, an escaped murderer hid in the back seat of an automobile, which happened to belong to a police detective. The would-be murderer was shot dead by the detective, who managed to slip a pistol into his free hand while driving under the killer's instructions, and to turn around and suddenly fire point blank. However, this does differ from the legend in several important ways. It does not concern a woman alone at night, and there was apparently no attempt on the life of the detective, merely the use of a car to escape, and there was no third person involved in the real incident. However, it could have gotten quickly out of hand. And we now go to one of the most persistent urban legends of modern day, one that is definitely fixed in popular culture. The idea of alligators living in New York sewers. This story seems to come from a writer named Robert Daly's 1959 book called World Beneath the City. And in it, he described an eyewitness account from a man named Teddy May, who was New York's superintendent of sewers. And according to May, sewer workers had been telling him about alligators as far back as 1935, but he didn't believe them. Eventually, May went down to see for himself and spotted several alligators averaging 2 feet in length. They appeared to be quite content, all according to May. However, it was later said that he was prone to tall tales, so it's a bit hard to separate fact from fiction. However, there are reliable accounts of some alligators in the sewer. According to the New York Times, New York's Animal Care and Control rescues 2 to 4 alligators, crocodiles, or caimans, but they're usually above ground. The bacterial load of your average sewer system makes it relatively inhospitable to reptile life. Beware though, some animals like rats have been known to crawl through plumbing and into residential toilets. Which now brings us to our next urban legend. Imagine this. You walk into the bathroom late at night, groggy with sleep, you lift up the lid and position yourself over the toilet. hear splashing, turn on the light, and you see a rat looking back at you, you're scarred for life. Now, legends about animals in sewers have been a staple of scary stories, particularly, as I said, the idea of alligators being flushed down the toilet and growing to adult size in waste channels. However, it should be noted alligators would as I said before, would not be able to survive in such conditions as it is very cold in New York City. Anyway, finding a rodent in your toilet inches away from rather vulnerable areas of your body is completely possible. Well, I'm here to tell you folks that's actually happened. Drain plumbing for toilets is typically 3 inches in diameter or more, which would be plenty of space for a rat to climb. The animals are attracted to sewage lines due to undigested food and human waste and can travel through pipes before emerging through an opening and into your bathroom. And yes, rats can somewhat be testy when they complete their journey. One aquatic rodent bit the rump of a female victim in Petersburg, Virginia in 1999. And in Seattle, the issue is so common that public officials have given advice on what a person should have such an encounter. Close the lid and flush. Sorry, I can't say that with a straight face. And on the subject of plumbing, we have another story involving water. And this one is definitely not for the faint of heart. And you've been warned. Legend goes that a family is moving into a new apartment and discovers that their tap water is discolored, has an odd smell, and tastes funny. A search of the water tank reveals the culprit is a dead human body in the water supply. This story, too, has roots in reality. In 2013, the body of Elisa Lamb was discovered in a water tank at a Los Angeles hotel. Her death remains a mystery to this day, however, and strange footage of her inside an elevator shortly before her death taken only makes the case more perplexing. And it should be noted that for weeks, the hotel staff had been told by guests that the water smelled funny and tasted funny. And I think that after that, you should like to hear some stories that have no basis in reality. Starting with the story about the killer from inside, calling from inside the house. Stories have circulated about a babysitter home alone who receives harassing phone calls. And when the call is finally traced by police, the babysitter is horrified to discover the calls are coming from inside the house. Now, why that exact scenario has never been documented, there have been multiple unsettling reports of babysitters being insulted. In 1915, a 13-year-old named Janet Christman was killed by an intruder while babysitting in Columbia, Missouri. Police suspected a man who had been friends with the family of the 3-year-old boy she was watching, but he was never charged. Not all stories of killers result in dying. And from my experience, it's usually the stories of near hits that prove to be effective stories, not a near miss. A collision is a near miss. Oh, look, they nearly missed. Yes, but not quite, thank you, George Carlin. One popular urban legend has been called Humans Can Lick Too. The story goes like this. A person, usually a woman, wakes up in response to some strange noises. The person lets their hand dangle at the bottom of the bed and feels a reassuring lick from the family pet. The next morning, the pet is found dead and a note reads, "Humans can lick too." This story dates back as far as 1871, when a story made the rounds in England about a jewel thief who hid under a bed and licked the hand of the homeowner so he wouldn't get up to investigate. And now, one of the most popular urban legends that actually turned out to be true. Have you ever heard the story about the haunted house that had a real corpse on display? Well, this actually happened. And it happened during the taping of a television series. During the taping of the 1976 television series, The $6 Million Man, a crew member on the show was setting up a sequence at a fun house at an amusement park when he tried to adjust what he thought was a fake corpse, and of all things, and the arm fell off and it revealed real bone and muscle tissue. And it was the arm and body of an outlaw named Elmer McCurdy, who was shot by the authorities after a train robbery in 1911, who was then embalmed in Pawhuska, Oklahoma. His body was then taken on tour. This was at a time when it was common for people to want to see the corpses of famous criminals. Eventually, the body got mixed up with some wax dummies and wound up in Long Beach, California, where he became a popular prop. He was later given a proper burial in Oklahoma in 1977. This now brings us to one of my personal favorite urban legends, which is also rooted in fact. I happen to find the story somewhat inspiring. And here's one for you folks in Pennsylvania, that is, if there are any listening. Throughout western Pennsylvania, a story has been making the rounds since, I want to say, maybe the 50s even, and continued onward, about a man with no discernible facial features whatsoever making his rounds along dark streets. Picture this. You're walking along a street at night in Pennsylvania. You hear footsteps, you turn around, and suddenly a man with a misshapen face appears. It almost looks as though he has no face whatsoever, just a mouth. You run, terrified beyond words, and you spread the story of the man with no face throughout Pennsylvania. Well, I'm here to tell you that the story does have roots in reality, and I happen to find it somewhat inspiring because it shows that no one is bound by the ties of their disability. Man with no face, or the Green Man as he has also been come to known, was once a real living man. His name was Raymond Robinson. Born in 1910, he was disfigured as the result of an electrical incident at the age of 8. While walking on the way to the local swimming hole along with some of his friends. Another boy dared him to walk up the power lines of a trolley bridge, take the eggs that were in a bird's nest. Young Raymond did, however, he accidentally touched a live power line, and which sent electricity through his body, which caused him to lose an arm, both eyes, his nose, and an ear. However, miraculously, he survived, and as he grew older, he began to take walks alongside the dark streets throughout western Pennsylvania. He knew his appearance would be somewhat alarming, so he stuck to walking at night. Some said that the skin on his face was somewhat green because of an infection. However, the nickname the Green Man might have also came from walking in his favorite jacket, which was a green color. He would often stop and talk to travelers, and would sometimes have short conversations with people in exchange for cigarettes and beer. He was also able to supplement his income by making leather goods like wallets and doormats for people. And those who knew him, and even met him just a few times, said that he was one of the sweetest people they'd ever met. And it just shows that people are not bound by their disabilities, whatever they may be. I hope that this story uplifts you in some way, as it did to me the first time I heard it. Well, folks, looks like it's about time to wrap up again. So, thank you for listening to Bowtie Talks. Be sure to hit the follow button if you haven't already, and subscribe to the Bowtie Talks Instagram page and the Bowtie Talks Facebook page.